Hey, good morning, Jen. Welcome to the Energy Nerd Show.
So I'm Jennifer Kallay. I work at Synapse Energy Economics, and I also am a commissioner in Wakefield, Massachusetts on our Municipal Gas and Light Department Board, which is our municipal utility board.
Cool. Hey, can you tell us what you do as a commissioner?
So we have a 5-person board that basically oversees the general manager of our municipal utility. We review strategy and projects, and we make decisions in terms of certain projects to proceed with.
Cool. What are you going to talk about today?
Today, I'm going to talk about a simple data set that I put together to assess the solar opportunity on all of the municipal buildings in my town.
Cool. Let's look at the numbers.
The magic to this really was that it wasn't expensive or time consuming to produce, and there wasn't really a study needed to take any kind of an initial look. So I think that a lot of people feel that they need these complicated studies that take time and a lot of money to produce in order to take some quick assessment, but that's actually not true. All you need is some folks that could be energy nerds, and so that's kind of the message of today. So we combined several data sources that aren't really frequently combined in some of the analyses we do in town. Roughly, those were some building information from our Department of Public Works, data on the quality of sun exposure at the different sites, data from our utility, which you actually, if you're in a territory where you can't get that easily, you really don't necessarily need it, and some assumptions on panel size, solar costs, and panel output, which are pretty readily available online. And then you need 1 day and 2 people. So you need one person to, just put the numbers together, and then you need a second person to do it separately on their own. And I'm going to describe why in a second, because we're going to use a tool that requires kind of a second check from another individual. So that check is a really complicated check that I like to call the eyeball method, which I use a ton in my work, which is literally just looking at stuff and making a assumption. So maybe I'll start by telling the story here with a little more detail on the buildings. In 2019, we had some state grant funding to install Wakefield's first solar on a municipal building. And we had a deadline to spend those funds. And so we started with a project that we knew was up and coming. We were going to get a new roof on a local elementary school. And so we started looking at that in 2019. What we realized pretty quickly is that the structure was not sound for solar, couldn't really bear the weight very well. It's one of our older schools and needed some work in order to sustain the solar. And the other piece was it was going to take years to do it, and we didn't really have that time to wait. So what I did was essentially say, well, instead of just focusing on one building, why don't we look at our entire town and look at all the buildings we have? We have 15 to 20 or so, roughly speaking, in our portfolio, and see what's around. The spreadsheet that we put together was looking at all the buildings, establishing some criteria for kind of prioritizing efforts that could be used for this one and others in the future, and then using that information to decide where to go from here. So the first thing I want to show, I think, in terms of the criteria, is to go to this view that I have on Google Sunroof, which is a great tool that can be really helpful. And so I have a slide here that shows 3 images. The top one is literally just the website. So you go to the website, google.com, get sunroof, or you can search Google Project Sunroof. It'll come up pretty quickly. This site is pretty well designed for residential homes, but you can also use it with some adjustments for your municipal buildings. So you type in the address of the building and click Check My Roof. And what you see if you look at the second view, which is just below it, is a view of a roof. So you see on the map this red indicator for the roof that you're looking at. And it gives you some data here on the square feet available for the solar panels, taking into account trees and other impediments around the building. And then it also tells you how many hours of usable sunlight you have per year. And those are the 2 key pieces of information we pulled from this tool. And so what you can see here is the site. So this site that we were looking at in this case, you can run this for all your different buildings. These are our water department, sits on a reservoir. And there are 3 buildings on the site, and the one building that we wanted to look at was this building on the left of the 3 buildings, and that is actually a water department garage building. And I want to contrast that building view with the one you see in the upper right-hand corner, which is a view of our middle school building, which also has a relatively new roof, so the garage building does too. The garage building has basically nothing on the roof, and in stark contrast, the middle school has a ton of equipment on the roof and various things that would make it challenging to kind of build solar around it. Those structures you can't put solar on.
It looks like the school roof is flat with all that stuff on it, and the building that we're looking at, actually doing the project on, is maybe more south facing, or half of it is.
Exactly. The middle school building is flat, and the garage building, there is some angle, but actually it's quite minimal. It's not as angled as the buildings, say, next to it, which is very steeply peaked, and you can see the purple section. So the gold sections are where the sun is the best, and then the purple sections are where the sun is not as good, and that building definitely has some shading on it. What we did was to ignore essentially some of the other information on this site, which was information about the cost, which you see below, the savings that you can get from the install. So we just used these two key pieces of information. Moving into the spreadsheet, we built a quick spreadsheet to just summarize all this information. And I want to draw your attention to under the public works column, so this is column C, we have age of roof. That was a key consideration because you want to look at buildings with newer roofs so that you don't have to replace the roof in order to put the solar on top as a first pass. And so this is an example of two buildings that we have, again, the water department building and the middle school with really pretty new roofs. So what you want to do is think about how new the roof is, because the newer roof will be more readily accessible and more available to put solar on. In columns D and E, you see the Google sunroof inputs. So these come straight from the website that I just showed you. And then I want to talk about column F. So we found that actually the estimates from Google sunroof for solar availability in particular, so this is the square feet that you can put solar on these roofs, is a bit optimistic. So what we did was use our eyeballs essentially to adjust these figures. And we input a D-rate factor, so a factor to reduce the solar availability on the buildings by some amount. And so what you see here is, and this is really for edges, so the tool really does assume that you run the solar up to the very, very, very edge of each building, and that's not necessarily the case. And so you see here we used a D-rate factor of about 65% for our water department building. And you can see for the middle school, when we eyeball it, because of the amount of equipment on the roof, you'd want to use a bigger D-rate factor, potentially saying that 20% of that original estimate might be good for solar on that particular roof.
I guess the mapping tool can see that there are things on the roof, but it doesn't account for them, maybe doesn't know what they are.
That's where you need to kind of use your eyeballs and make an educated guess. And this is where it's helpful to have a second person do the same exercise. We found that we were mostly aligned, but there was one building we kind of had to talk about and come to some decisions on.
So then we're going to look at the economics next?
Sure. So you want to put in your utility rates here. And so that's what I've included as a next step. The other thing we're doing is making some basic calculations that really resonate with people in terms of scale. So you want to change or convert the solar availability into number of panels, because it does help people to kind of process what we're talking about. And you can do that by just using an assumption about the number of square feet per panel. So that's what we did here, and we see that we have about 60 panels, and this is actually true. This install on the water department building was about 60 panels. You can also see that, for example, the middle school opportunity is actually quite larger, had about 600 panels. And these are rough estimates, but it really does give you a sense for scale and scope. And then you can calculate the energy from it, again, using some pretty basic assumptions. Current panels are running at about 350 watts per panel, so you can figure out the system size, and then you can calculate the annual solar production using the hours from, again, Google sunroof. So those are some basic calculations that pretty much anyone could make. You can also input a cost per watt and then, again, convert the system size into a total cost for the installation, which is very helpful when you're thinking about town budget and what might be amenable to folks in that proceeding. And then you can calculate the savings too over the lifetime. And, we assume 25 years here. They actually could be up and running for much longer than that, potentially up to 30 or 40 years. For the water department install, they assumed that they might see about $4,000 of electricity savings per year. So just to give you some sense of scale, the water department install is about the size of 2 to 3 homes. It's a pretty small building.
So then what do you do next? Install some solar panels?
Yeah, when we looked at Google sunroof, it's a great tool because we were able to look at this building and immediately say, wow, like that site looks really, really good. There's nothing there. The building is kind of lighting up in gold. This might be a very good opportunity. And so what happened from there is, I provided this spreadsheet to our municipal utility and said, hey, check it out. Check out this building and this site and see if any of these might be of interest. They did, and they came back. So this is where I get to chat a little bit like how cool it is to have a municipal utility. I provided this spreadsheet to them in January of 2020. They came back in February with rough engineering specs for the site for this particular building and presented it at a board meeting. The board approved that project in February. And at that meeting, the general manager literally handed the project off to the engineer to move forward with it. The next week, I believe, the municipal utility talked to the Department of Public Works, got approval for the project. The week after that, talked to the town administrator, got approval for the project. This was around March, and in March ordered the parts. So now we're talking about March 2020. We're entering COVID, and we're saying, oh wow, it might get complicated, but it actually kept progressing. So that was pretty cool. And the install ended up happening in April. So overall, 4 months from the moment this project even was considered or thought about to when it was actually installed.
And did the town have to finance? Does it come out of the town budget?
So in this particular case, we had some incentives, as I mentioned, that we needed to use. And one of the key considerations was that, I essentially said, wouldn't it be cool to find a building in town where that could be basically free or nearly free given the incentives we have available to us? And so that's one reason why this project did move so quickly, is it was essentially free for the town. It did not go through town budget because there wasn't really a cost. So it's just straight savings to the energy costs of the town that's going to flow through to all the residents that live here.
So did I understand it right that the town went ahead and did the water department project, but not the school project?
Correct. So I mentioned the Greenwood Elementary School project. That project did not move forward because of the structural issues. The school I'm showing here is the middle school, and it's really just being shown as a point of comparison for scale. That school may be under consideration in the future. It does have a relatively new roof, but it wasn't on the table currently. I think one of the most important things for Wakefield, and I think potentially for other towns, is to not ignore the little projects, because it gives everyone some practice with working together and collaborating on these projects. And so I think for us, it was a really important stepping stone to getting everyone working together, seeing some of the data. And I do hope that that will translate into doing some of the bigger projects in the future. It was so easy, it was so quick, and everyone worked together really, really well. So that is a good news story for all, I think.
That's great. What a happy story. What a great example. Thanks, Jen.
The last thing I want to do is just quickly show the picture of the project. This is one side of the roof. There's 30 panels on it. There's 30 panels on the other side. What I hear anecdotally is that our Department of Public Works director is very excited about the savings that they're seeing and wondering when they can have the next solar install in one of their buildings. So we'll be looking at our spreadsheet again to see what other opportunities we have.
Yeah, it looks like $5,000 a year of energy savings.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. And in this environment, everything is of value.
Absolutely. Thanks for talking with us. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thanks for watching. This is Energy Nerd Show and Tell.
It's the show that we want to watch. So we're thinking maybe some of you energy nerds want to watch it too. If you do, then hey, tell your friends and subscribe right around here. Click there.
And check
or there or over here.
Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and where
Yeah,
else?
and the Energy Nerd website at energynerdshow.com. You can always go there. And if you want to be a guest, you can volunteer to be a guest. We love to have guests. In fact, that's kind of what the show is all about.
Absolutely.